As companies thriving to be socially responsible, we know that our efforts cannot be limited to our internal operations, but also require us to be more outward-facing. How can we cultivate communities where residents can reach their full potential? I know I'm not supposed to say that. And create value for all. Our next panel, Strong Families, Vibrant Communities, will take on some of the challenges that we're seeing in our communities and discuss the opportunities that have demonstrated impact. I'd first like to thank New Hampshire Charitable Foundation for sponsoring this panel and in using their insights on community issues to guide this discussion. I'd like to invite Tim Rourke, Director of New Hampshire Tomorrow, and for the Charitable Foundation to join me on stage, as well as the panelists AnnMarie French, Executive Director of the New Hampshire Policy Institute, Jeff Baker, Founder and Chief Storyteller for Image4, Stephanie Manners, Vice President for People at Megafood, Emily, Director of Administration at W.S. Badger, Barry Brenziger, Principal at La Valley Brenziger Architects, and Manchester Proud Coordinator. I'm looking forward to the great discussion among these panelists, but also want to let everyone know that you will have the opportunity to share your thoughts and questions in the last 15 minutes of the hour. So, Tim, thank you very much for guiding this discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. We are your post-lunch entertainment, so we'll try and keep it lively because we stand between you and break. I want to thank Michelle and the entire team at BSR for hosting today's event, for all of you for taking the time to be here, and we're just proud on behalf of the foundation, my colleagues, some of whom are in the room, and our board and staff, just thrilled to partner with you all and bring this conversation to you today. The topic of our discussion is going to be strong families, vibrant communities. And I want to start with what I know will be a shocking revelation, which is that you are more than the sum of your parts. I think we have our name tags with our titles and our affiliations, and maybe you have letters after your name. I know I have a few. But very often, we don't think about, talk about, or represent truly the ways in which our entire life experience brings us to who we are in our professional worlds. At the Charitable Foundation, I have the pleasure of directing an initiative called New Hampshire Tomorrow. New Hampshire Tomorrow is a 10-year, over $100 million commitment on the part of our foundation to help reduce the opportunity gap for kids and families in New Hampshire. What is the opportunity gap? It is any number of barriers, roadblocks, and challenges that can prevent kids and families from reaching their full potential. Whoever you are, wherever you've arrived in your life, you have done that by navigating your own successes and challenges. Perhaps you've had mentors, parents, role models, educators that formed who you are, that gave you that pathway to where you sit today. But for too many kids and families in New Hampshire, that is not available. And so our foundation has made a commitment to change that dynamic, committing resources from our own philanthropic capital, partnering with other funders, donors, companies, many of whom are friends of ours in this room today, to engage in a decade-long effort to combine grant-making and support in the nonprofit sector, coalition building at the state and local level, and policy work in Concord and beyond to try and make investments that reduce the length between someone's hopes and dreams and their goalpost. We engage in this work in 4 investment areas: deep investments and engagement on issues around early childhood, family and youth supports to support families who are at risk, and we're going to spend some time talking about some of those families today, addressing the behavioral health epidemic, which is a significant driver of our economic and societal challenges, and ensuring that every young person and every adult who wants access to an education that can further their career gets it, and gets it in an unfettered manner in a way they can afford, so that they can become the vibrant citizens of New Hampshire that we need to secure not only our state's future, but the future of the companies you lead, work for, and are committed to. We are engaged in those areas because we know that we are the sum of our parts. If you ask an educator, what are you worried about in students today, they will tell you, I'm not so concerned about their academics. I'm concerned that kids aren't coming to school prepared to learn because of what's happening in their home life. If you ask a doctor, what do you care about with high-risk kids and families that you may see in your clinic, they won't talk about their health issue that might present them, their fever, their broken arm, their headache. They will talk about what's happening in their life that is negatively impacting their health. So as we think about how to change our communities, various systems, our healthcare delivery system, our education system, our community conversations are more and more talking about whole people. We can't just deal with your education. We have to know you as a whole person. That is creating incredible transformation in the healthcare system, in the education system, in community systems, and I dare say, I hope today's conversation with some of your colleagues I have the great pleasure of sharing the stage with will help you advance that thinking within your own company and system. So to get us started, what we wanted to do is kind of give you a profile of what's happening in youth and families in the state of New Hampshire. These issues are impacting your employees. Maybe you know it, maybe you don't. But to use some data around what's happening for families, their financial health and well-being, their stability in New Hampshire, to then begin to hear from some of your colleagues in the business sector who have taken incredibly innovative approaches in their companies and communities, recognizing the need to tend to the whole person in the context of their work. So I'm going to start by turning over the microphone to AnnMarie from the Center, the Fiscal Policy Institute. We are blessed in the state of New Hampshire to have a nonprofit like the Institute who can help us focus and elevate those financial and other societal challenges that really do move people too far from the goalpost and help us think about what some of those family challenges are that you may be experiencing within your employee base. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to AnnMarie.
Thank you, Tim. So, I'm delighted to be here with you today to lay the groundwork for this important conversation. It's true, New Hampshire's economy is doing very well overall, and yet many families and individuals continue to struggle to make ends meet. In the next few minutes, we'll review some of the challenges they face and a few of the related financial concerns. New Hampshire ranks among the top 10 states in terms of median household income, with a statewide median of just over $73,000 a year. And yet, at the same time, 1 in 5 households have income of less than $35,000 a year. New Hampshire has the lowest poverty rate in the nation at 7.7%, and our state has held this #1 position for many years. There are around 100,000 residents living in poverty. 26,000 of them are children. That's 1 in 10 New Hampshire children living in poverty. Housing is a significant expense for many families, and this is particularly true for renters. The lack of housing that is affordable to those at the lower end of the income spectrum is particularly concerning. Statewide, the median rent with utilities for a 2-bedroom apartment is $1,296. It is recommended that households spend no more than 30% of their income on housing. And yet here in New Hampshire, 47% of renters pay 30% or more of their income on housing. The National Low Income Housing Coalition calculates the housing wage, which is the hourly wage it would take for a 2-bedroom apartment at fair market rent to be affordable. By this calculation, it would take $22.32 an hour, working full-time, to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in New Hampshire. Now, let's look at how housing costs and other expenses fit into a basic budget. There are 2 online tools that help to shed light on the cost of living here in New Hampshire. On the left is the Living Wage Calculator, published by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. On the right is the Family Budget Calculator from the Economic Policy Institute. The 2 budgets shown on the screen represent the statewide average costs for a single parent with one child. While these two tools differ slightly in how they estimate some costs, viewing them side by side provides a meaningful look at the budget to income challenge. Notice the resources devoted to housing, shown in gray, and transportation, which is in orange. It's worth noting that as people move further away to find less expensive housing, their cost for transportation will increase, particularly if they travel over rural roads that may not be well maintained. Notice also the portion consumed by childcare, shown in the bright blue. After these costs, there may be little left for other areas, such as food and other necessities. Choosing the smaller of these two budgets, this single parent with one child would need a full-time hourly wage of $25.71 an hour to make ends meet. In times of financial strain, the food budget is often the easiest place to reduce expenses. This can lead to food insecurity, which is a condition where someone is unsure where their next meal will come from for a certain period of time. In the most recent survey, 50,000 New Hampshire households reported experiencing food insecurity. This represents 9.4% of households, nearly 1 in 10. Despite the state's strong economy, this rate is higher than before the recession. So saving money is a challenge for many families. A 2017 national survey by the Federal Reserve found that 41% of adults did not have the resources available to meet a $400 unexpected expense. Specifically, they did not have $400 available in cash or via a credit card that would be paid at the end of the month. They would need to borrow money, sell something, or find another way to cover the cost. This number is alarming. 4 in 10 adults did not have access to $400. Contributing to financial instability and the inability to save are the income losses that many people endured during the recession and the long recovery. Now, I know this slide is daunting, but it helps to illustrate a very important point. This graph shows the inflation-adjusted wages by income level, starting from the pre-recession in 2005. The purple line that runs across the center is the baseline. The orange line is the median wage. These wages remained below the baseline from 2011 to 2017. But if you can notice the bottom two lines in blue and green, these are the 10th and 20th percentile wages, those with relatively low incomes. These wages fell behind inflation during the recession and remained well below for 7 to 8 years until they began to rise in 2016. These workers likely spent their savings in this time period, and they have lost significant ground in the last 10 years. This makes it harder for these individuals to save for a rainy day, much less financial goals like a new home, retirement, or a college education. Level of education is closely correlated with increased income and economic prosperity, but the cost of obtaining a degree can be daunting and often requires individuals to rely on other forms of debt. Nationally, 42% of those who have attended college have incurred some form of debt. The challenge is particularly acute here in New Hampshire, where the statewide average debt for a bachelor's degree is over $34,000 a year. New Hampshire ranks 4th highest for the level of student debt, which is likely due in part to the state's low level of public investment. Affording the cost of higher education is a significant challenge for many New Hampshire residents. Now, I know we're short on time, so the last two slides, one lists some opportunities for you as an employer, simple ways that you can help your employees increase economic security, and you have the 211 cards on your table, so you can use those as the resource. And the final slide, I've listed resources from this presentation. Michelle will email these around afterwards. So before I turn this back over to Tim and our panel, I'd like to thank all of you for your commitment to deepening your understanding of these issues and to working together to enhance the resiliency, vibrancy, and prosperity of New Hampshire residents and communities. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, AnnMarie. So what I'd love to do now is, and I know we have a little bit of an obstructed view from this section with the podium here, so bear with us. If you guys maybe want to move your chairs forward, that would be great. It's sort of an emotional arc. I think AnnMarie has shared some information that might be surprising or slightly daunting in terms of some of those challenges that families in New Hampshire are facing in very real time. But I think what is the benefit of this conversation is that there are very specific strategies that you as business leaders can engage in, that your companies can engage in, knowing these kind of factors may be in existence for your employees and your surrounding community? What role can you play to be catalytic in reducing these challenges, supporting families as they navigate some of this? So what I hope to do in our remaining time together is I have some questions. I'm going to start with each panelist to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves and maybe talk a little bit about how their company and their work touches on some of these issues. And then with time permitting, we will open up the microphones for questions and dialogue back and forth, because we really do want to make sure that you leave this room at the end of this time feeling like not only you have a better understanding of what families are facing in New Hampshire, but what some of the tricks and tools you can deploy in your own work to address that. So I'm actually going to start with Jeff from Image 4. And I had the great pleasure of visiting with Michelle and the group a few weeks ago, and Jeff shared an incredibly powerful story of how his company really came to think about their employees from that whole person approach. So I think I'd love Jeff just to talk about that incident that you experienced and what that meant to you and your company.
Thank you very much. 2, 3, anything? Great, thank you. So I'd like to frame this in the concept of, or the structure of awareness to discovery and then finally to action, I think. We're a smaller business, we're about 20 folks. We pay substantially above common rate for a wage. We have just gone through our own exercise on what constitutes a livable wage, and we've decided that our baseline wage is $27 an hour. That's what it takes for our single parents to live in Manchester and come to work every day and do the job that I ask them to do. That's a big number. So we had an opportunity a little over a year ago to hire a project manager. The talent pool is a little thin out there right now, you may notice. And we were glad to get a warm body who showed up. And turns out this woman was very competent. She was really good at what she was doing. We were encouraged. We were hopeful. Training was progressing well. And in the interview, she made clear to us that she was transferring from welfare to work, as a concept. We're used to that. We're a family-friendly business. We won the Sloan Foundation Award for our family-friendly practices. This is just where we live. So the entire staff was ready to accommodate that. What I think all of us didn't understand was that in that transition, you have no resources, really. You're coming from a place of total lack. So when her car broke down, and she couldn't get to work, and we had projects at risk, and the number far exceeded $400 to repair. I really had to scratch my head. I come from an era where they taught you in B school the corporation is the corporation and the employees are the employees, and we've moved beyond that. But really, I was looking in the mirror and saying, where do we now have to move, given the stresses we have in society? Given that, I think I figured it when we were first talking, 60% of my staff is or has been a single parent. So we kind of went out on a limb and we loaned her the money for a car, which was, not what we had planned to, patterned, thought about doing, but ultimately it was the right and the necessary thing to do. Because we needed her back at work. It's very simple. I'm a business guy. It's pragmatic. That then triggered a whole groupthink from my staff around what's our role as a corporation in the whole lives of our staff members. Where do we need to be now? How do we meet our staff where they are today, so that I retain the staff, and our retention rates are stellar. How do we engage with our staff who don't need this help in a way that they value the help going to other staff members, as opposed to feel that it's a conflict or taking something away from them. It's been a very, very rich exploration and discussion, triggered by my personal commitment that we're going to take action and help someone.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. We'll turn next to Emily from WS Badger. And people may be familiar, hopefully people are familiar with Badger, but if not, maybe Emily, you could just take a few minutes and share a little bit about the company's history. Also noting that you are in a rural area of the state and yet have been pretty successful in recruiting and retaining top talent. So could you just talk a little bit about Badger's approach to some of these issues?
Sure, it's my pleasure. So I have the privilege of working for Badger. We have about 100 employees right now. We manufacture natural and organic body care in Gilsum, New Hampshire, 800 people in Gilsum. And I think that we've been known for a long time for our benefits and for our culture. So we're known as a family-friendly business because we are a family-friendly business. We have a lot of policies in place that support parents of young children and young children, including babies at work. And we have a near-site child care program, dependent care, reimbursement for parents whose children are school age. And we have a culture that's been based on the mission of our organization, which was really laid out by the founders of our organization. So the millennials and the Gen Xers that you were talking about earlier are excited to work for us because we are really invested in making a positive impact in the world. So this has been part of our organization from the beginning, but I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about how we got to have that culture and that benefits package. And it's really, I think, coming from our founders, an approach that has been able to look at individuals as individuals. So when people come forward and are able to share what they're experiencing in their lives, the approach has been not to say, oh, that's just you, that's just one-off situation, but to say, how can we meet this individual where they are? And then even more than that, so just like your story, say, if this person has this need, they're speaking for a system, and that's a system in our organization or it's a system in our community. And what is our role as a business in answering that need in the community or in the individual? And so taking the policy that we can make for one and spreading it out to the whole organization. So, our Babies at Work program started by one parent saying, can I bring my baby to work? And we said, yeah, and how can we do that for everyone else? I think more recently we've been looking at policies that have rounded out the needs for families, thinking about the generation that's caring for children and their parents, not just children, and saying how can we support them, looking at paid FMLA, which is an important social and political issue right now, and also looking at substance use disorder. When we started to hear in our Badger community how it was affecting we were hearing like more and more people saying, oh, it's my child, it's my friend, it's my neighbor, etc., saying what's the role of business in addressing a problem that's a community-wide problem. So we started to bring in training for team leaders, training for individuals, training in Narcan, training for parents on what to recognize in their children around substance use and recovery. So I think the message I'm trying to share is that one person is brave enough to speak up, but they're speaking for a whole group of people, and it's the responsibility of the business to respond, a sustainable business to respond and support a larger community. So,
great.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I'll just say for folks, as Emily referenced the recovery and substance use related work that Badger has done, that the Recovery Friendly Workplace Initiative, which is a statewide initiative, and I think you're going to hear from Mega Foods in a moment, who's done some similar work in this space. They are here in a table out in the hallway. We encourage folks to check out some of those model programs. So Stephanie from Mega Food, if you could maybe share a little bit about your company, and I know that, again, that's an issue that you work on, but also curious, recognizing, and I think Jeff alluded to it as well, the issue of living wage and some of the work that you guys have done to analyze that and think about that for employees. Maybe you could share a little bit of that story.
Yeah, you guys can hear me, right? I'm responsible for the people team at Mega Food, and to be honest, I hadn't really thought a lot about living wage prior to Ashley bringing the opportunity for us to get involved with B Corp and finally becoming B Corp certified. That it really kind of got my attention, and largely because working in New Hampshire where unemployment is so low, I feel like from an employer's perspective, we've been pretty competitive with our wages. We do benchmarking every other year, so we made sure that we were paying people, around the median, and we didn't have a lot of high turnover in our manufacturing jobs. And, when I thought about our culture and what we try to do from a human resource perspective is really cultivate a culture of inclusivity that enables and encourages our employees to thrive, right? When you think about thriving, there are certain basic needs that need to be met before you actually can thrive as a person. One of the challenges, this is what really made me think about living wage, one of the challenges we have in a multi-shift manufacturing operation, and Ashley is the one trying to juggle this, is when we have events. We're always trying to figure out what's the best time to have an event, right? When we have people on multiple shifts. Do you have it in the afternoon, late in the afternoon? I can see some people nodding their heads, so you know what it's like, because again, with inclusivity, we want to make sure that we're recognizing, supporting, and celebrating all of our employees. And what occurred to me was when we offer an event that we think meets the needs of our off-shift employees, a lot of them don't come. And I was, making an assumption across the board that people don't come because, well, this time doesn't fit with me and I don't want to go to the event. And what I realized was there are actually quite a few employees that are working multiple jobs. And that's why they don't come to those off-shift events, right? Or the shift that we tried to make more reasonable to accommodate them. And it made me think a lot about this term that we've been hearing a lot, or we heard a lot. I don't hear it that much more about the gig economy and how, younger people coming into the workforce, they're going to be more entrepreneurial and they're going to be thinking about how they can be their own boss and go out and do lots of different things rather than sign up and work for a company. And it sounded like such a cool thing, like the gig economy. And the way I started thinking about it is that's not a young, cool thing. That's actually a necessity for a lot of people, including people in our own company. So that was very long-winded, but this brings me to the fact that, we need to look at living wage. It's the right thing to do. So as a result of going through our assessment for B Corp and realizing where we had opportunities to really lean in, and I have to tell you that when I first met with AnnMarie and looked at the stark reality of what it actually costs to live, I wouldn't even say comfortably, but just to live and begin to thrive, we're not there yet. We have a lot more to go. So I can't even wave a flag and say, I'm so proud we're hiring people at a rate that is minimally 25% above the living wage for a single person. Big deal, right? Especially when I hear what my friend here right down the street is paying, but different jobs in different market. However, it was eye-opening, and I feel like it's the first step, and it has made us look at our workforce, and it has made us look at our pay scales across, starting with our folks that are in the manufacturing and warehouse areas. But in order to be inclusive, you need to make sure that you're providing an environment where people can thrive.
That's great. Thank you. So I think last, before we start some discussion and hopefully engage all of you, is Barry Brensinger. And, I think as you've heard, we have some folks who have really taken a look inward at what the company can do with its employees and within its walls, also doing work in the community. And I think Barry has a fantastic example of the way he and his company as business professionals in Manchester have reached outward to really tackle some challenging issues in the education system in the community. So I'm going to give Barry a few minutes to talk about that initiative in Manchester.
Thank you very much, Tim, and thanks to all of you for the opportunity to tell you a little bit about Manchester Proud. I'm not going to say much about LaValle Brensinger other than I'm very grateful that they have essentially my partners have given me a window of 3 years to dedicate almost all of my time to this initiative in Manchester. So I'm very appreciative of that within the company. Manchester Proud is a movement in Manchester. It's about 18 months old. The intent is to bring our entire community together to better understand, appreciate, and ultimately support our public schools. Sounds good? Not an easy thing to do. It came about in part because of what I'll call an awakening of our business community. So, as has been said by a number of folks on the podium today, life in New Hampshire, life in Manchester is pretty good right now. Generally speaking, a booming economy, all the sectors are doing well, with the notable exception of our public schools, which have largely fallen from our consciousness as a community. So about 18 months ago, as I said, a small group of business people got together and said, we need to find out what is actually going on in our schools, what is the current state of our schools, and what, if anything, should we do about it. Upon learning that the district is without a strategic plan, we had the catalyst that could bring us together to at least start a conversation. And we said, we are going to privately raise the funds to undertake a comprehensive, aspirational, and achievable plan for the future of our schools. And we had a board meeting this morning, a council meeting this morning, and to date we have raised $775,000. And what's in part remarkable about that is all but $18,000 of it is already in hand, to give you some idea of the support we've gotten from our business community. In order to bring about this as a community movement, the plan for our schools, we believe, needs to come from the ground up rather than the top down. So this isn't a small group of educators or administrators sitting in a conference room creating a plan they can push down into the district. This is about a grassroots effort. I think arguably in the past 18 months we have had the most robust community engagement activity in the history of Manchester, including thousands of door knockings, surveys, 116 listening sessions, one-on-one private sessions with all of our principals, administrators, school board members, and on and on and on, all for the purpose of learning, answering that initial question, what is the current state of our school district? So, having said all of that, I'd like to share with you just a little bit of a window into what we've learned. First of all, we've learned that there is greatness in our schools, contrary to what you might believe if you just listened to or just believed what you heard through the media. There are great things happening in our schools at all levels. But that greatness is compromised by the issues in our society that have already been outlined by Tim and others, by poverty, by drugs, health, trauma, and all the resultant behaviors that come from that kids bring to school with them every day. I would make the case that if somehow you could wave a magic wand and take those things away, our schools probably aren't any better or worse than they were in the good old days that we all misremember. What has changed, and what this panel is talking about, is New Hampshire's families, and in this case I'm talking specifically about Manchester's families. So bear with me in making up some numbers, but if you would go back in time a few decades ago, I'm going to say, just making up a number, that probably 75% of the families in Manchester provided the external support systems that their kids needed to do well in school, the things we've been talking about. So they had relatively stable households, the kids were fed and clothed, and there were behavioral norms that were reasonably well understood in our community and in our country, and we didn't have the drugs and other things to the extent that we do today. And I'm not pretending that things were perfect back then by any stretch. I think the numbers in large measure have reversed. So now it is the minority of kids who come to Manchester schools with those external support systems. And yet our expectations of our schools haven't changed. We still have this fantasy in our heads about what a school kid is and what a high school graduate is in a world that's very different than it was not that long ago. And that very unfairly puts the burden on our schools and our teachers as we expect them to do that work for us rather than with us. And so what Manchester Proud is all about is saying, if we're going to truly bring about change in our district in a meaningful and enduring way, it has to be by the community. It's just fundamental to how this works. And what we've learned through case studies across the country is that where this works, it's the business community that steps up and provides a leadership role. By and large, the business community has been an essential component of success elsewhere in the country. Just one last little story, and to tell you in part why I think the business community is pretty amped up about this in Manchester. We went to our Board of School Committee about a year ago and asked for their endorsement to proceed with this work. And when we went to them, we had 100 signatories of businesses and organizations in Greater Manchester, the most notable of our not-for-profits, the largest of our employers, and on and on. And in order to get them to be signatories, we went and spoke to each one of them. And the universal theme, already touched on again today, was this whole workforce issue. Everyone is concerned about workforce. And if we think it's a challenge today, I would argue fast forward 5 or 10 years in your heads and imagine where we're going to be. 2 weeks ago, I was sitting in our Chamber of Commerce, and there were 2 institutions in town who were talking about collaborating. And the leaders of the 2 institutions said between the 2 of them, they have 1,000 open job positions. I left that meeting, I called Mike Skelton at the Chamber, and I said, wow, if that's true for 2 companies, I wonder what it is for Manchester. And he said, I can find that out. So I went to monster.com, and according to monster.com, there are 8,000 open positions in the city of Manchester. Now, that's just on Monster. So, you know, companies like mine and Jeff's and others probably aren't on that list. I know among our 80 employees, we have 10 chronically open positions. So I'm going to speculate there are 10,000 open positions in Manchester. So where are these people going to come from? I think we can all accept the fact that there are going to be winning and losing communities going forward. There are going to be communities who have public schools who provide a pipeline of talent that they can cultivate and retain in their own communities, and who have the reputation of excellence in their schools that will attract outside talent. That's what we want Manchester to be. That's what our group and our business community is working hard to do. And please go to manchesterproud.com. One word, Manchester Proud. Check us out and get involved. Thanks.
Thanks, Barry. Thank you. Thank you, Barry. So we're running on time. We have about 15 minutes left. And what we would like to do, I know that hopefully there's been a lot of inspiring ideas and examples that you may want to probe a little bit more. So there are microphones here and here. I am not afraid to call on people. So I would encourage folks, if there is a question you want to ask, if there's an innovation your company is doing or thinking about in this space, you are welcome to share that. As people are beginning to move, and I know you're all going to, thank you, because I will call on you, is maybe just to ask the panel before taking it to someone in the audience. You know, Barry talked about education as an example of a place in the community where he and his partners really viewed the need for business to lean in and for the community to see change. I'm just thinking in terms of the other communities and the businesses that you all represent. Are there other gaps in the community that you see in your experience of trying to support families where you do feel like there needs to be more action in your region, in your city, in your community to address based on your own observations? Jeff?
I'll dive in first as one of the outcomes of our exploration. We went out of our office to find resources to help us solve this problem, and then also to help us think about how to institutionalize those solutions. And finding those resources was extremely difficult. I hadn't heard of 211, shame on me. But in addition to that, there are a number of other resources that are available, and I'm learning about their availability. I would love to approach it from a business owner perspective and have some sort of gap closure so that the businesses who are looking for this support have a landing pad? And how can that be advertised? How can that be marketed and made available so that it's the easy button for me, very low friction access?
Right. Yeah, great. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi there. Thanks so much for your time and presenting today. As a business that has a retail component, as many of yours do, how do you, even if your heart's in the right place and you want to provide, top dollar wage, living wages for all of your employees, how do you do that in an environment where you have a retail-facing business and there's price pressure on your product and the margins are really low? And where do you find the money? Do you have any tips for how to afford it without cutting your quality or there's kind of all these pressures on you. You want to be a great employer, but how do you do it? Thank you.
I would say so. We're still trying to figure out how to do it, and it's been an evolution. And we do an annual business planning process where we start the budgeting for the next year very early on in the current year, and it seems like what happens is we go all in with all the things that we want to do at our company, and that is limitless, and we use a filter of what we're really trying to accomplish strategically. And then, we have the same pressure. So we're a retail business. And then we start to cull that list down of what we're going to spend money on. But one thing that I realized is, a business is very fluid and, you plan, right? And that's a joke because whatever you put in paper, in 3 months it's going to change anyways. And I think we talked about that, how people have to revise their expectations for the business. So we've, with Ashley's support and my team's support, we've been able to kind of guide those conversations to make sure that we were recognizing the importance of a stable workforce because you can't have quality product to sell and meet your margins if you don't have a stable workforce. So we have seen, I don't want to say we've measured a return on investment in the investment that we've put, but our turnover, generally speaking, in our, in the warehouse and in manufacturing where we're building our product, that's the most important. Where we're touching and building and crafting our product, it has paid off because we don't see a lot of high turnover there. But I would say, aim high and then be prepared to pull some things out, and then you really have to be focused on what's most important, and it's a trade-off, throughout the year of where you're spending your money. And then once it's in there, it's hard to take it out, right?
We have ended up rethinking our compensation system, which we were able to do because we really are a mission-driven business. But what I wanted to offer is that there are a lot of benefits you can provide employees that are not that support work-life balance, that support families, that are not necessarily hit your bottom line that hard. So, for example, microloans or low interest or no interest microloans that can be paid back through payroll deduction is something that we've offered for, I think, as long as we've been around. And that is one way that we've been able to allow employees who are living paycheck to paycheck to get through these humps where they might have to spend a lot. Another thing that we do is budget a specific dollar amount for parents to help pay for camp programs when their kids aren't in school. And that's a very budgetable amount because it's limited, it's per employee, and it's not going to increase year over year necessarily like some of your other benefits might. So thinking creatively about what helps people in their moment of need. Also, flexibility is something that's in theory pretty close to free and makes a huge difference in the lives of families. So that's what I would suggest, be creative.
Great, thank you. Let's go over. No, sure. Gary?
Sure, thank you, Tim. I just wanted to amplify the response to the 211 mention that was made earlier. Jeff, if you don't feel bad about it, it's okay. I'm Carrie Gladstone with Granite United Way. We run 211 New Hampshire. And if you're not familiar with 211, you're probably not one of the 45,000 people who called 211 New Hampshire in the last year looking for help with people facing eviction, foreclosure, homelessness outright, keeping the lights on, putting food on the table. So those are just some of the things people can do. And if 211 is a phone number that's disruptive to your thinking, you probably know that if you had a medical emergency among someone in the workplace, you would dial 911. 211 is the statewide information and referral service that works on a whole host of things that's listed on the back of the card. That's a partial list, so bring that back to the workplace. And if there is a situation, if you want to be a recovery-friendly workplace, as Tim referenced, you can also dial 211 if someone is having a problem with substance use disorder. As you've heard about the newly implemented hub and spoke model to get people connected with prevention, treatment, and recovery, people can dial 211 24/7 and get connected with the particular hub to that system. And if there's any other questions, I'll be around.
Great. Thanks, Gary. Yes, over here.
Yeah, thank you so much for all your great ideas and suggestions. I just wanted to switch it a little bit along the lines of keeping our employees healthy. I sometimes feel bad. We're providing a lot of food often for our employees. Most of it healthy, a lot of it not. Wondering if you have any suggestions for how, in general, you encourage healthy behaviors and try to help your employees with maintaining a healthy life beyond health insurance.
Okay, well, we have the pleasure of having an organic lunch served to us every day, so I'm about as spoiled as you can get. So other than that, we find, I see in our organization that our employees really love a little friendly competition. So we've partnered with the Cheshire Healthy Monadnock, which is well-powered work sites now, I think. And we participate in a challenge called Right This Way, which is an online platform where you have teams in your organization competing with other organizations in the community. So we've had a lot of fun with that. We have walking trails. We have one of our employees, and this is sort of approaches the idea of seeing employees as whole people, is a yoga teacher, and was really excited to offer yoga to her coworkers after work. And we have another employee who's a fanatical marathoner who has been taking up personal training for his coworkers after work as well. So seeing maybe the strengths that you already have in your community and allowing them to bring that to the workplace.
We use ridicule.
Yeah.
I think to reinforce your comment, we look at our employees as the whole person, and it is amazing the talents they bring to work every day we never know about. And when you start asking, it's amazing also how generous most people in the world will be if asked to dive in and help out. So we initiated changing chairs and just putting in standing desks for all of our desk-bound employees. That was a business capital expense that dramatically improved the day-to-day performance and physical feeling of our office staff. And that started us on this amazing trail of people diving in and saying, well, I use an exercise ball, ... Or let's take a break and walk around the building, ... So we've semi-formalized that by having, we took a skills assessment of every single one of our employees that did not include work skills. Who are you? What do you do? What makes you passionate? What can you bring to the organization if we ask you to do that? And I cannot begin to tell you what a cultural shift that brought around the organization, both personal performance and health.
So I am seeing we've got two folks. What I'd love to do is make sure that we protect time for our two folks to raise their questions, and then we'll have a concluding remark and move to your next breakout session or break. Go ahead.
Sure. My name is Tiffany Ferguson. I work for the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston in the Regional and Community Outreach Department. While we are based in Boston, we are just as much your Federal Reserve as we are the rest of the region. A lot of people don't know that. And so my job every day is to think about business practices at the intersection of improving worker economic security and improved business performance. So it's exactly what you all are talking about. It's new work for us, and sort of what my role is to sort of surface, aggregate, and amplify those business practices. And our assumption in doing this is that if you put more of these stories out there, more of these case studies, more of these examples, more people might sort of see them, take them, and want to take action. So my question for you all, and some of you alluded to this a bit, but I'm interested in a little bit more specificity, is once someone says, okay, this is something we need to do, what exactly do you need? What does it take? Who do you need to be? What do you need around you? What supports, what partnerships do you need to actually do that work well? Because I know there's a lot of people there's a coalition of the willing, but then they throw their hands up and they're like, we don't really know what to do. So it's, what are those first steps, and what are those things you need in order to take those steps to do some of the great work that some of you have shared?
So I'll comment on that. First of all, I want to ask, what was your title again? Because I love your unique role. And while many of us probably do that with different hats on, but I missed what you said.
That's because I didn't say my title. It's Community Development Analyst.
Great. Mm-hmm. So what does it take to launch something that suits an individual need? And I think, Jeff, actually we all talked about, like, looking at the person as a whole person. It's interesting, working for a consumer products company, we spend a lot of money doing studies on our consumers, and it occurred to me, and I don't know why, it just recently occurred to me, that what we learn about our consumers is the same as our employees, right? And most smart companies now are really focused on, making their product more personalized to people, to individuals, and recognizing that that's what people want. So I think it would force to reason that that's what our employees want as well. So one of the things that we have done in the past is we taught people how to make a business proposal, or at least kind of boil down an idea that you have in a way that can be digested and thought about in a company. So if somebody came to us and said, well, this is not very unique to some companies, but thinking about summertime hours, like shutting down early, through the summertime on Fridays to let people leave and get a head start. So someone raised that as, like, we should do that. It doesn't take a lot to do it, doesn't necessarily cost a lot of money if it's managed well, but the way we look at it is, and what we encourage our employees to do is, let's just try something. What's the worst thing that can happen? If it fails, and we'll do something different. Or I shouldn't even say it doesn't fail. If you try something, it might not work, or it might be another solution that works better, but just try it. If one person brings a solution, and like Emily said, if one person asks for something, there's probably other people that are thinking or asking for the same thing. So I would suggest that you lean into those opportunities and try to offer something, even if it kind of breaks those paradigms that we looked at before. Well, we're the business, you're the employee, we can't do that. You probably can without really hurting or disrupting the business. So I would say take a risk and try it. And if it doesn't work, try something different.
Great, thank you. And so our last question, go ahead.
I know we've just hit 2 p.m., so I'll try to make this quick. But to you, Barry, and others can chime in as well, I was curious as to, for the disadvantaged students in the Manchester School District and other urban areas in New Hampshire, graduates that want to pursue employment opportunities that may not have the funds to have attended college, for those 8,000 to 10,000 assumed job openings, is there currently a system in place for high school graduates? Are these companies going right to the schools and notifying students that they have employment opportunities should they not have the funds to attend university right off the bat?
2 things in response to your question. The first is not a direct answer. The second will be, I promise you. One of the things that has been crystal clear in our work is that there are deeply rooted systemic inequities, biases in our schools and elsewhere in our city, in our state, which severely restrict access to the very kids who need it most. And so we intend to deal with that assertively. In fact, I mentioned we had a council meeting this morning. We spent 2 hours exploring how to create a new working group within our community to focus on that specifically, because as hard as we've tried through community engagement, there are impediments to minorities and others in our community to get engaged in the work. And we are truly committed to being authentic in comprehensively engaging them. So the whole issue of access and equity is critical to the success of our work. The second part, and the more direct answer to your question, is that our ultimate plan will have a couple of buckets of information. There'll obviously be teaching and learning because it is a plan for the future of the schools. There will be a section in the plan on finance, governance, operations, and what we call community adjacencies. And the community adjacencies is precisely what we're talking about. It's how do we get businesses in our community to develop enduring relationships with our schools in ways that can provide resources and other opportunities for our kids to learn in a way that a fair amount of that already happens in the community, but it's not organized in any logical or productive way. So we intend to create an infrastructure that enables that going forward.
You know, and I'll just add at a state level, and wrapping up, that there is some of that dynamic that's happening in Manchester is happening at the state level through an initiative called 65 by 25, looking to create and provide better access to high-valued credentials, and the number of citizens in New Hampshire who have a high-value credential that could lead them into an economically stable future and a career pathway. Recognizing as well that there are high-need sectors of the workforce right now for which a 4-year college degree is actually not required. So working to create those kind of pathways, whether your pathway is ultimately a 4-year degree or higher, or whether your pathway may be engaging in an apprenticeship, working with a local business connected with your high school, accessing the services of the community college system, so that we can create those kind of flexible pathways to get people into those kind of more established, sustainable careers at the front end. So with that, I want to first and foremost thank our panel for giving of their time and wisdom with all of us. I would hope as we wrap, you continue to engage them. They will be here, I'm sure, as we move on into the break. I also just want to thank all of you on behalf of, again, the Charitable Foundation, and our work is very much rooted in building communities of health and value in the state of New Hampshire, and you are a critical part of that fabric. We are a state where actually I don't believe we have to operate from a place of lack. I think it is a place of limitless opportunity and assets, of which you are one in our communities, and to thank you for your commitment to our communities in whatever way your business and your professional life you engage in that, and hope that you will take some of these ideas and make that happen in your communities to accelerate keeping kids and families well. So thank you very much.